Alright, it's Henry again, and this is going to be a work in progress video for the high-grade Universal Century Dom. This is a pretty simple high-grade, not too complicated, and I am going to be doing some, I won't say minor modifications, some intermediate modifications to this kit. This is actually a commission. Normally, I tried not to do modifications on commission builds simply because modifications can get really time consuming and really complicated, and most of the time it's just not worth the time and effort and money, and it's just I just don't want to mess with it. But the mods to this guy are going to be so quick and so simple that I made an exception. So anyway, I am going to be modifying this into the Dom Funf, or Fünf, or something. The one from the Zeonic Front PlayStation 2 game. Basically, the only real difference is the shoulder armor is going to be shaped a little bit differently, and it's a different color scheme. Also, I'm going to be putting an LED inside for the mono eye, also by the customer's request. So, first thing I'm going to do is whip out my epoxy putty and modify the shoulder armor. Alright, so I've done a little bit of work on these shoulders. Basically, just put a ridge of epoxy putty on each side of the top of the shoulder armor, and then just sanded it down, smoothed it and blended it in with the existing shoulder armor, and then just squared it off on the tops. Also, scribed a little zigzag panel line on each shoulder, did that on the front and on the back. And, this is actually the PS2 game model of the Dom Funf, and as you can see, the shoulder armor is a little bit more squared off on the bottom, so that is what I'm in the process of doing right now. I'm just taking a little bit of epoxy putty. I'm going to put it on the bottom of the shoulder like so. And it's not going to look perfect right now because this putty is still quite soft, but I'll just sort of generally mold that into a more rectangular shape like so. And now when that putty cures, I can go back and sand it down and smooth it out, and it'll be seamless with the rest of the shoulder armor. Alright, now it's time to talk about this LED. Alright, so I want to put an LED in the head for the mono eye. Now I've actually already done all the work, so I'm just going to show you what I did. Now the biggest challenge with, well, two challenges with installing LEDs is actually installing the LED, but then you also got to think about where's the battery going to go. I mean, you could always just run a wire out the back of the mobile suit and have a battery pack somewhere out here, but it always looks so much better when the battery is inside the model, so you don't see wires coming out of it. So it's pretty tricky when you get into 1/144 scale kits because there's not a whole lot of room inside there, but I managed to just barely find enough room. Okay, so on the waist section there was a block of plastic right here that really didn't do anything, so I just chopped that off. Sawed it off, sanded it down, so that gave me a little bit of room right there. This black lower part of the torso, hollowed out a whole lot of it. The peg is still there, and it's still got a little piece of support plastic holding it in place, so I'm not worried about it snapping off or anything. But a lot of this I hollowed out. I made sure to leave the connector that connects it to the gray part of the torso. Let me pull this head off real quick. The gray part, the upper torso, I didn't have to do too much to. All I really did was just cut out a little rectangle right there. Didn't have to modify that part. And let me actually show you what I've got going on here. This is the battery case I'm going to be using. And I actually had to trim the edges of the battery case off because it's a tight fit. But anyway, these old alligator clips won't be here once I get the wires actually soldered on. But it's going to fit right up in there. And that way, the battery will be easily accessible when you take the torso off of the waist section. So these wires are going to run up through here. Wires are going to run through that hole and then up into the head. Now this is where it got a little bit tricky. The Dom has the plastic non-light up mono eye is on a little ball joint like this, and it fits into that socket so that way the ball joint can, you know, go left and right. It goes up and down a little bit. So I very carefully cut off the plastic mono eye that you would normally just put a sticker on and replaced it with a 3 millimeter pink LED. And I bent the leads down 90 degrees, as you can see. And I had to cut down here because this was originally solid plastic right there. So I cut this little sort of crescent-shaped hole so that the LED leads can fit down inside there, and the mono eye is still movable. It doesn't move up and down quite as much, but it does still move. It has the full range of left and right movement. And then you just put all the stuff back on here, all the outer armor, and get your LED in there. And I'm actually going to pause here and connect these wires and connect the battery case. Alright, so I just sort of got the LED hooked up with some alligator clips. There's not enough room in here to put a switch. I got the battery case and the wires and the LEDs in here, but there was not enough room for a switch. So the only way to turn it off and on is just going to be to put the battery in and out. So slip this guy in here. Wait. Kind of tricky doing it with one hand, but yeah, you get the idea. Oh my god, I can't even talk today. Now I realize it looks super bright. It's actually not quite as bright in person. It's just the way the camera's perceiving it. I'm thinking what I'll do is there's a clear part in front of the mono eye. I may paint over that with some clear black to maybe dim that a little bit. It'll still be perfectly visible. It just won't be quite as bright if I go over that clear part with a little bit of clear black. So, LED install success. Alright, starting off with the painting. Now start with the red parts using some Tamiya red lacquer. And there aren't a whole lot of red parts on this kit. Basically just the insides of the thrusters, the underside of the skirt armor, and then the red part on the head around the mono eye. Moving on to the gunmetal parts. This is my homemade gunmetal paint, just gloss black mixed with some Mr. Metal Color aluminum, and I'm using this for all of the weapons and joint parts. For the dark green parts, I'm using Mr. Color number 512 Russian Green. And for the light green parts, I'm using Gundam Color UG06 MS Green. And for the clear parts, I'm just using some Mr. Color GX clear pink. Okay, and I'm just finishing up the decals here. Went relatively simple, just some Xeon and some numbers on the shoulder armor, and then the rest of it is all just little caution markings, things like that. The decals I used, let's see, I actually pulled them from several places. Got the War in the Pocket Xeon decal set. Let's see, these are just some third-party decals, some third-party high-grade Sinanju decals, and some, I think these are high-Q parts, just generic 1 to 144 scale caution markings. And before I start on the weathering, I'm going to go over the whole kit with a nice clear gloss coat. First things first, I've gone over the entire kit with a wash of Mr. Weathering Color Ground Brown. That's just going to give it a nice dirty look, and I'm wiping away the excess with a paper towel. Now I'm trying a little something different for the chipping on this kit. What I've done is I've already done some sponge chipping with some light green and light gray acrylic paint. And I had an idea to do the rust colored chipping just with the brown Real Touch marker. It's not something I learned anywhere, it's just an idea that popped in my head, and I wanted to try it at least once just to see if it worked. And since the acrylic paint I used was flat, the Real Touch marker is absorbed pretty well, so I didn't have to worry about it smearing off the first time I touched it. And finally, for top coat, I'm using All Clad 2 Flat Clear. Okay, so everything is top coated, and I'm now doing final assembly. So we got the LED down in here. Here, I'll just use this. And it can still move. Moves back and forth. The up-down movement is kind of limited and kind of sort of go up and down a little bit, but mainly just right and left. So anyway, got the wires going down through the holes I showed earlier, and then the battery case is right here where the waist peg is. Now, there wasn't enough room to install a switch because I was already working with limited space. So, to turn the LED on and off, really, is just putting the battery in and out, like so. So anyway, I did paint the visor area with some clear black, and it definitely helps. I think it cuts down on how ridiculously bright that LED is. So, let's just pop this little guy in here, like so, and the Dom is finished, and I think it actually looks pretty darn good. So, Dom Funf, or Fünf, or however you say it, custom shoulders, LED for the mono eye, custom paint job. So yeah, there were a few. There was actually more seam lines on this kit than I thought there was going to be. There's a seam line right here. It's weird. Like there was a seam line right here, but then for this part, like that's still the seam line, but Bandai decided to put a panel line there, but not up here. So that was kind of weird to fix, but I fixed it. And then let's see, there were seam lines on both the bazookas, obviously, and then there was a seam line going across the shoulders, actually all the way around this gray part on the upper torso, as well as the formerly black part for the lower torso. So, and the shoulder armors as well, shoulder joint rather. The spherical part had a seam line on it. Actually, I guess that's kind of a seam line right there. I didn't really feel like messing with it because that would have made it really complicated, so I just didn't bother with that one, to be honest. So, we do have a few Rick Dom parts. I did go ahead and paint those just in case the person who commissioned the kit wants to switch it out for a Rick Dom version, including the bottom of the feet here. Alright, so that about does it for this work in progress video. And I will upload some photos, do a little photo gallery video after this. And with that, I'll see you guys next time.